It was a typical family gathering, one of those rare moments where everyone comes together, whether out of obligation or tradition. The house was filled with the scent of roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and the soft murmur of conversation. I had always hated these gatherings. The way everyone pretended to care about each other, the way my parents pretended to care about me. They never did. Not in the way that mattered. I sat at the long wooden table, feeling the familiar pang of invisibility. My parents were engrossed in conversation with everyone but me. My father, in his usual seat at the head of the table, spoke with a colleague about work. My mother played the perfect hostess, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, nodding at things she wasn't listening to. I was there physically but not emotionally, and they made it clear. It was in that moment that I realized something I had known deep down all my life. I didn't belong here. I watched as my parents made sure to include my younger siblings in the conversation, asked them about their lives, their plans, their dreams. They had always treated them as the more important ones, the ones who deserved their time, their attention. But when I tried to speak, when I tried to insert myself into the conversation, I was met with silence, or worse, polite indifference. The sting was familiar. The feeling of being invisible. But tonight things were different. Tonight I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Tonight I had something to say. Something that would make them see me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small envelope I had carefully hidden there. The DNA test results were in. It had taken months to get them, months of silence and secrecy, but I had finally done it. The truth was no longer just mine, it was something I could hold in my hand and force them to see. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, holding the envelope, and slowly walked to the head of the table where my father sat. The room fell silent. My parents' faces slowly shifted from their forced smiles to expressions of confusion. "Dad," I said quietly, my voice steady but firm. "We need to talk." He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing in irritation. "Not now, Evelyn. We're in the middle of dinner." "No," I replied, shaking my head. "Now is exactly the right time." The tension in the room thickened. I could feel all eyes on me, my family's gaze shifting between me and my father, wondering what was about to happen. But nothing could have prepared them for what was coming next. I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately. I looked at the results for a moment, as if savoring the moment, letting the anticipation build. "This," I said, holding up the paper for everyone to see, "is a DNA test. It's the truth that you've spent my entire life hiding from me." The room was suddenly charged with a heavy, palpable silence. Every pair of eyes at the table was fixed on me. My father's face hardened, the smile that had always been there, a mask of politeness, vanished completely. My mother's eyes darted nervously between me and my father, clearly unsure of how to respond, her lips parted in a thin line. I held the DNA test results up higher, making sure everyone could see. The truth was now in front of them, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking back. I wasn't the one forced to play a role in their lies. "I know what you're thinking," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "You're probably wondering why I'm doing this now, why I've waited so long. But the truth is, I've known for years that something was wrong. I've always felt like I didn't belong in this family, like I was different." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, trying to regain control of the situation. His voice was cold, trying to mask his discomfort. "Evelyn, this isn't the time or place for this kind of conversation." But I wasn't listening anymore. This was the time. The time for all of us to confront what had been buried under layers of silence and manipulation. "I don't care if this isn't the time, Dad," I said, cutting him off. "You've spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough, that I was a mistake. But now I'm telling you I'm not your mistake." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of my words sink in. My father's eyes were now narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line, but I could see the tension in his face. This wasn't going how he expected. "Evelyn," my mother finally spoke up, her voice a little shaky, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is completely inappropriate. This isn't how we raised you." "Raised me?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You didn't raise me. You raised a version of me that fit your narrative, your idea of what I should be. But the truth is, I was never who you thought I was. I'm not your biological child, am I?" I watched my mother's face turn white. The truth had been spoken. The secret they had hidden from me for so long was now laid bare. The look of shock on their faces was everything I had been waiting for. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the one searching for answers. I was the one holding the key to the answers. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The room felt even colder as he stormed toward me, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is absurd," he spat, his voice thick with anger. You've crossed a line, Evelyn. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I stood my ground, feeling the power shift in my favor with every passing second. The years of being dismissed, ignored, and controlled were now slipping away. They had no power over me anymore. I'm doing what you never did, I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper now but filled with conviction. I'm facing the truth. And you're going to face it too. We're done pretending. There was a long, tense silence as my father stood, seething, and my mother struggled to find words. The rest of the family, including my siblings, were utterly still. No one knew what to do, what to say. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me. Finally, my father spoke, his voice trembling with something between rage and defeat. You don't understand what you've done. You don't understand the damage this will cause. You think I care about the damage? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You never cared about the damage you caused me, did you? About the years of feeling like I didn't belong here? About the lies you've lived? Well, now the truth is out. I'm not the mistake you made, you are. He took a step back, looking almost defeated, as if the years of control he'd held over me were slipping away with every word I spoke. He didn't have an answer. He couldn't defend himself because he knew what I was saying was the truth. He had spent my entire life pretending, manipulating, hiding behind his own lies, and now it was all crumbling. I could feel the room shift as everyone began to realize the magnitude of what was happening. I was no longer the overlooked child, I was the one who held all the cards. I had taken control of my own narrative. I looked down at the DNA test results one last time, a small sense of satisfaction rising within me. These results say what I've known all along, I continued, still holding the paper in the air for everyone to see. I don't belong to this family and I never will. But you don't get to define me anymore. This family doesn't get to control me. And I'm done living in the shadows of your lies. The room was silent, and the weight of my words hung in the air. My parents, once so confident in their control over me, now stood in stunned disbelief. My siblings, who had grown up watching me shrink into the background, looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. The power dynamic had shifted, and for the first time in my life I felt seen. My father, still standing, took a deep breath as though trying to gather his composure. You think you can just walk in here, make accusations, and walk away with some kind of victory? Is this what this is about for you, Evelyn? Some twisted need to feel justified. I could feel his anger, the same kind of anger he had always used to intimidate me, but it no longer had any effect. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. In fact, I almost felt sorry for him. For years, he had been the one controlling the narrative, making decisions for everyone around him, but now the tables had turned. And he couldn't stand it. I walked toward the center of the room, still holding the envelope in my hand. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was only a few moments. My family didn't know how to react. The truth had been thrust in their faces, and they were struggling to process it. No one has ever asked me what I wanted, I continued, my voice growing more confident with every word. I've spent my entire life being treated like I don't matter, like my existence was some kind of mistake. And you've let it happen. You dad, you let it happen. And you mom, you stood by, silent and complicit. But now I'm the one in control. Now I get to decide who I am and where I belong. My mother, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up. Evelyn, please, her voice trembling. This is a family matter. You can't just. I can, I interrupted her, my tone firm and unyielding. I can do whatever I want now. The truth is out. And you can't control it anymore. I could see the realization dawning on her. She had spent her life hiding behind the facade of being the perfect mother, perfect wife, but the cracks were showing. They had all lived in a world built on secrets, and now those secrets were coming to light. My father didn't say anything else. Instead, he turned his back on me and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy, as though the weight of the truth was too much for him to bear. He never looked back. It wasn't until after he left that the room became truly still. My siblings were silent, unsure of what to do, but I could see the questions in their eyes. They had always followed my parents' lead, had always been part of the narrative that was dictated to them, but now they were seeing their world unravel. I looked at my sister, the one who had always been the golden child, the one who had never had to fight for attention or validation. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and curiosity, as though seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. You're not what they said you were, she finally said, her voice quiet. No, I agreed, my voice steady. I'm not. And I'm not going to let them define me anymore. I'm going to live on my terms. The aftermath of that dinner would ripple through my family for years. The next few weeks were a blur of emotions, accusations and confrontations, but nothing mattered to me anymore. The truth was out, and the weight of years of silence had been lifted from my shoulders. It didn't take long for the ripple effect to reach the wider community. The exposé I had planned, with the DNA results now in public hands, sent shockwaves through our social circle. The carefully crafted family image my parents had spent decades building was suddenly shattered. News outlets picked up the story, and soon whispers of my family's lies and deceit were circulating. For the first time in my life, I felt empowered. I was no longer a bystander in my own story. I wasn't just the invisible child at the table. I was the one who held the truth, and the world was finally listening. I didn't need to confront them anymore. They had already been exposed. My parents' business relationships began to deteriorate as people realized the depth of their dishonesty. Contracts were pulled. Their network began to collapse. Their empire was falling apart, and this time there was no one to pick up the pieces. It was in these moments that I felt truly free. Not because of the downfall of my parents, but because I had taken control of my own life. No longer was I tied to their expectations, their manipulations, or their version of the truth. I had finally stepped out from their shadow and claimed my place in the world. In the weeks following the dinner, the aftermath unfolded like a slow, controlled burn. My father's business partners, once loyal to him out of respect or fear, began to distance themselves. The damage to their reputation was swift, like an uncontrollable wildfire. The truth, my truth, had spread, and there was no going back. But I didn't revel in their downfall. That wasn't the point. Revenge wasn't about seeing them suffer for me. It was about seeing them finally exposed for who they really were. All the years they had dismissed me, all the times they had left me out of the conversation, all the ways they had tried to bury me under their control, it was all coming to light. And while the public humiliation stung, it wasn't what fueled me. What fueled me was freedom. I was finally free to build my own future, free from their expectations, their judgment, their suffocating love. It was time to start building something real, not for them but for myself. The first step in this new chapter was the company I was now part of. After accepting the offer from Elliot, the tech startup I had joined was gaining momentum. The network I was building wasn't just about creating wealth, it was about creating a legacy that wasn't built on manipulation or deceit. It was built on honesty, innovation, and above all, my own merit. The people around me, Elliot, the investors, the team I worked with, saw me for who I truly was. They saw my potential. And that was all I needed. Each new meeting, each contract signed, each new investment deal I made, was a small victory. A victory not just in business, but in reclaiming everything I had once been told I couldn't have. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still something missing. Something that would make everything complete. I wanted my parents to see me, really see me when it mattered. Not because I asked for their approval, but because I had earned it on my own terms. The opportunity came when my company was ready to launch a new product that would disrupt the market in ways that no one had anticipated. It was going to be a game changer. And I knew that this was the perfect moment to show my parents just how far I had come. I arranged a meeting with them, something I had carefully planned. I knew they would be expecting some kind of emotional confrontation, some desperate plea for their attention, their validation. But I wasn't interested in that. I had no desire to beg for anything. My father looked up from his desk when I walked in. He seemed surprised to see me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and resignation. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold, though I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I'm here to show you something," I replied, my tone calm and measured. "I'm here to show you that I don't need you. That I never did." I placed a folder on his desk, the contents sealed tightly inside. I didn't need to say much. I knew he would see the weight of what was inside. The documents in that folder weren't just business proposals. They were the proof of everything I had built on my own, the success they had always told me I would never achieve. "I've been working on this project for months," I continued, still calm. "This is the product that will change everything. It's everything I've worked for. It's my success, not yours. And now, it's time for you to see the reality." My father didn't speak for a long time. I could see his mind racing as he flipped through the folder, his face slowly losing its color. He couldn't deny the magnitude of what I had done. Finally, he looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something other than contempt in his eyes. There was respect, but it was fleeting and it didn't change anything. "I see you've been busy," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I've been more than busy," I replied. "I've been building." I stood up to leave, knowing that there was nothing more to say. There was no apology, no final confrontation. I had already won. As I walked out of their office, I felt lighter than I ever had before. I was free, not just from their control but from the need to prove myself to anyone. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to justify my success to them. I had made it on my own. And that was enough. As time passed, my life continued to move forward, and the silence between me and my parents grew. There were no calls, no messages, no attempts at reconciliation. The world around me had already shifted, and there was no room for them in my new life. They had made their choices and now I had made mine. I was living on my own terms. The tech startup I had joined was growing exponentially. Each day felt like a new chapter and I was at the center of it all. My name was becoming known in circles I had once only dreamed of entering. I was finally building something that wasn't just about success. It was about making a mark on the world, creating something that would outlast me. My parents, meanwhile, were fading into the background of my life. The family gatherings, the awkward silences, the unspoken tension. It all felt so far away now. I didn't need them anymore. And I didn't want them. Not in the way I once had when I sought their approval, their love, their attention. I had built my own future and it was far more rewarding than anything they could have offered me. One day, while sitting in my office, surrounded by the team I had helped assemble, I received a message that made me stop in my tracks. It was from one of my old business contacts, someone who had once worked with my father. The message was short, to the point. "We're sorry for what happened. We didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. But we see now, Evelyn. We see you." For a moment, I just stared at the message. It wasn't an apology, not in the way I would have expected, but it was something. It was a recognition. It was validation. Not from my parents, not from the people who had once controlled my life, but from the people who now saw me for what I was: capable, driven, and unbreakable. That small message was everything I needed to know that I had made the right choice. I had broken free from the chains they had tried to keep me in, and I had created something better for myself. And now the world was finally starting to see that too. Months passed, and with each passing day, I felt more confident in the path I had chosen. I had launched my own project, one that would revolutionize the way people interacted with technology. It was my vision, my creation, and I was finally able to bring it to life without anyone holding me back. But I wasn't just focused on business. I wanted to ensure that the future I was building would have a legacy. That's why I started a foundation, one dedicated to helping people from backgrounds like mine. People who had been told they couldn't succeed, that they weren't good enough. I wanted to give back, to make sure that no one ever had to feel invisible like I had felt for so long. And then one evening I received a letter. It was from my mother. It was the first communication I had gotten from her in months. I opened it carefully, almost hesitant, unsure of what it would say. The letter was brief, but the words were unmistakable. It was an apology. "Evelyn," it began, "I know I've made mistakes. I know I failed you in ways I can never undo. But I want you to know that I am proud of what you've become. I've seen the strength in you that I never truly understood. And I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me." For a moment, I stared at the letter, feeling the weight of the years that had passed. The letter wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was something. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition of everything I had overcome. But it was too late. My forgiveness wasn't something she could just have because she asked for it. It was something I had already given to myself. I folded the letter, setting it down on my desk. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already moved on. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city skyline. The lights below twinkled like stars, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. The journey I had been on, the betrayal, the manipulation, the pain, had all led me here. And here, in this moment, I realized that I had everything I had ever needed. Not because of the success, not because of the wealth, but because I had learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. In the end, I didn't need their approval or their money. I had the truth, and that was more than enough. The world outside continued to move, but for me, everything felt still. It was as if I had reached a point of clarity, a place where the noise and chaos of my past no longer held power over me. The business empire my parents had built, the same one that had been their lifeblood, their pride, had crumbled, and I was left standing, not in the wreckage but in the freedom that had been long overdue. My father's empire was gone, reduced to nothing but a fading memory in a world that was moving forward without him. The phone calls from investors had stopped. The once glorious office space now sat abandoned, just like the legacy they tried to build upon deception and control. I didn't need to gloat. There was no satisfaction in watching them drown in their own lies. That wasn't the point. The point was that I had created something they never believed I could. I had built my own future piece by piece from the foundation of truth and resilience. And now I was free to thrive. I looked at my phone one day scrolling through emails when I came across a new message from my lawyer. It was about the final settlement of my inheritance, the one they had tried to keep from me all these years. My parents had fought it every step of the way, contesting everything, convinced I would never have the strength to stand up to them. But now it was final. The inheritance they had tried to deny me was mine, and it wasn't about the money. The true inheritance was the freedom that came with knowing I could finally stand alone. I had done it. I had built it all. I wasn't just someone's daughter, someone's shadow anymore. I wasn't defined by their expectations, their legacy, or their manipulations. I was my own person now. The days that followed were filled with new ventures, new projects, and new opportunities. I was no longer the child who had to earn a place at the table. I had created my own table, and others were now pulling up chairs, eager to listen, eager to be part of what I was building. I invested in projects that I believed in, causes that mattered. I started a foundation, not for revenge, not out of bitterness, but because I wanted to give others the chance to succeed without the suffocating burden of others' expectations. My story had been about survival, but now it was about thriving and helping others do the same. One day, as I sat in my office looking out over the city skyline, I received a message from an old business associate of my parents. The message was short, but it spoke volumes. "We've heard about your success. We never realized the strength you had. You were always more than we knew." I sat back in my chair, letting out a quiet breath. It wasn't a victory to me anymore. It was simply the truth. People were starting to see it, starting to recognize that I wasn't just a product of my family, but a product of my own determination and vision. The narrative had shifted, and now I controlled it. Months later, my parents reached out to me again. This time it was my mother. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer any excuses. She simply said, "I see now what you've built. I'm proud of you." I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her how I had felt all these years, how I had been discarded in favor of their perfect image. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath and replied, "Thank you. But this isn't about your approval. It never was. This is about me, my journey, and what I've built on my own." There was no reply, but that was okay. I didn't need anything from them anymore. I had already moved on long before this moment. One night, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below me, I realized something profound. I was free. Free from their control, free from their expectations, free from the lies they had woven around me. The past no longer defined me. The future was in my hands, and I was no longer invisible. I had stepped out from the shadows they had cast over me, and now, I was standing in the light of my own making. In the end, I didn't need their approval or their money. I had the truth, and that was more than enough.